The other day, I saw a preview edit of the first episode of the WP Elevation podcast that didn't involve me at all, which was KRISTINA interviewing someone, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And it was weird, but it was also really exciting because, first of all, I want to thank you guys because I'm chuffed and I'm humbled that you guys want to be a part of this. So that's really rewarding for me. So no pressure, but don't screw it up, okay? Because I've worked really hard on this. G'day, folks, and welcome back to the WP Elevation podcast for 2017. Of course, my name is Troy Dean. I'm co-founder of WP Elevation, and I'm very pleased to announce that we are back with a regular publishing schedule this year. For those of you who have been following us for a while, we published an episode of this podcast every week for 2 years between the end of 2013 and 2015, and then we basically took a year off. Well, we are back now with a new format. We'll be publishing 4 seasons of the WP Elevation podcast this year. Each season will be about 11 episodes, and we'll be talking to subject matter experts from within and without the WordPress, from inside and outside the WordPress space, about everything you need to know to build a successful business as a WordPress consultant. And in other news, I'll be sharing the hosting duties with 4 other hosts. That's right. There'll be 5 of us all up hosting the podcast. Of course, we won't all be hosting every episode. We'll be sharing the hosting responsibilities. But on this very episode right now, I'm going to introduce you to those 4 hosts so you can get to know them, and so that when they start publishing their episodes, you're a little more familiar with them. We're very keen to hear your feedback and to hear who you would like us to interview on the podcast. So please get on over to wpelevation.com, check out the podcast, leave us some feedbacks, leave us some comments. But without further ado, let's go and meet the 4 other hosts of the WP Elevation podcast. Stay with us.
This is the WP Elevation Podcast, helping WordPress consultants elevate.
Hey, this episode of the WP Elevation Podcast is brought to you by WP Elevation. Well, more specifically, it's brought to you by a bunch of our happy customers. See, frankly, I feel a little bit awkward telling you how great WP Elevation is because you're probably not going to believe me, because WP Elevation is my baby. It's something that we started over 3 years ago. Of course, now we're a team of coaches and mentors, and we have hundreds, and by the time you're listening to this, probably thousands of members all over the world. But it still really is something that I'm very passionate about. And of course, if you join WP Elevation, we make revenue and we make profit. So it's a little bit awkward if I tell you how great it is, because you probably think I'm just trying to sell you on it. And partially I am, because I know how beneficial the program is. So what I'd love to do instead is just introduce you to some of our customers. So if you go to wpelevation.com/thepodcast, all one word, you'll be able to hear some of those stories from our customers and hear for yourself how WP Elevation has impacted their business and changed their lives. I hope you enjoy that, and I hope you check it out at some point. Right now, let's get back to the podcast. G'day, Troy Dean here from WP Elevation, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have with me Mike KILLEN, KRISTINA Romero, Kath Hughes, and Ginny McINNENY, who are all joining me this season, this year, as new hosts of the WP Elevation podcast. Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey man.
Hey.
Woohoo! Hey, let's do a quick round the table and get to know you guys. So if you just tell us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about your background. Let's start with Mike KILLEN.
Hey guys, my name is Mike KILLEN. I'm based in the UK. I run Devon Digital Design, and I basically tend to focus on lead generation and building marketing funnels for my customers.
Awesome. And I should mention, by the way, that all you guys are also WP Elevation coaches, and Jin is our producer / community manager here at WP Elevation. So I haven't just plucked you guys randomly off the street. We've been working together for quite some time. Kath Hughes.
Hi guys, Kath Hughes. I'm based in Sydney. My business is Phase Creative, obviously also coach at WP Elevation. So I run a sort of a small web design agency. I also train people in WordPress basics, and I'm sort of rolling out a bit of a DIY teamed with experts business later this year. So stay tuned, and I'm really excited to be part of the podcast this year.
Awesome. Ginny McINNENY.
Hey, I work full-time at WPE in the office with Troy. I'm the digital producer, but I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. So I've got some experience in videography, editing, community management. So I'm looking forward to bringing that sort of focus on the podcast this season.
Awesome. And KRISTINA Romero.
Yes, I'm KRISTINA all the way from the great United States. And on top of being a coach at WP Elevation and helping with customer success, I run KR Media Designs, which we have a lot of great clients on care plans. So I like talking about good stuff like that and recurring revenue. And then I'm also partnered with this really unknown guy named Troy Dean on Rockstar Empires, where we teach entrepreneurs how to make automatic revenue online. So all really good topics I love to talk about.
Cool. And so let's talk a little bit about the WP Elevation podcast. I just want to say that I'm humbled and a little bit freaked out that I'm kind of letting go of the reins after we did 2 years of the WP Elevation podcast where we published almost every week, and then we took a year off really and didn't do anything because it just kind of was, I almost kind of burnt out and just needed to refresh it and reinvigorate myself. And so now, the other day I saw a preview edit of the first episode of the WP Elevation podcast that didn't involve me at all, which was KRISTINA interviewing someone, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And it was weird, but it was also really exciting because first of all, I want to thank you guys because I'm chuffed and I'm humbled that you guys want to be a part of this. So that's really rewarding for me. So no pressure, but don't screw it up, okay? Because I've worked really hard on this.
We won't let you down. You're keeping back with the beer in your hand. We're doing all the work.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
There's a ton of time off now, and there's him thinking,
Yeah, what am I going to do? I'm going to start a new podcast to compete with WP Elevation. So what do you guys excited about? KRISTINA, you were saying before that you've always wanted your own podcast.
No, I'm so excited for this opportunity to actually talk with some really great minds in this space. It's always really nice to connect with these people. You know their name, you know their Twitter handle, you know what they've done, and then you kind of can get in there and just connect with them. Like I had a great interview with Dre Armida of Sakuri, and I kicked it off talking about his 4 daughters, and I have a daughter, and they're all obsessed with Frozen. So it was just really fun to connect with someone like that, and then launch right into website security. So it's a really fun way to get connected into the community, and then show that behind the scenes to all of our listeners.
I also want to say that when you interview people, can you please say hi from me? Because some of these people I've been wanting to interview for a long time, and I've got serious FOMO that I'm not going to get to chat with them. So just say hi from me when you interview.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like the people we've got lined up, WP Elevation, I think, is certainly becoming a known player within the WordPress space. But some of the people that we're looking to interview are people that all of us have looked up to and gone, wouldn't it be awesome to have like a 20-minute conversation? Like some of the people I've got lined up, that you guys have managed to get hold of, I'm like, that's insane. I read his blog like every day, and I'm going to be able to talk to him. It's just mind blowing. So purely from a selfish standpoint, you have to talk to these people.
Well, I tell you, one of the things about the podcast that I realized that it's kind of a byproduct. You don't realize this when you're doing a podcast, but it's amazing for your professional network because you end up with these relationships. You end up with chatting with people on Skype, and it's funny because usually I found some of the best conversations are the conversations that happen the moment you stop recording. Because then the pressure's off and people are saying, so tell me what's going on at WP Elevation. And you start, and half an hour later, you're still having this conversation. It's like, man, I wish we'd recorded this. This was awesome. But it's really good for your professional network. And Jen, you've kind of been watching me do the podcast for the last couple of years. So how does it feel to be stepping into the hot seat?
Well, you'd think vicariously I should be the expert on this now because I've been in the office so many times trying to do my work while Troy's yapping away. So I know exactly how it's done. So the test will be on. But because I've been with WP Elevation for 3 years now, and through that first podcast series, I was organising all the people that we were getting on, and I was new to the WordPress space. So Troy was telling me about these rock stars in the WordPress space. And I'm like, oh, okay, they they sound interesting, you know. And and now I realise how amazing they are. So, you know, I'm looking forward to some good interviews. I've got Andy McElwain coming up from GoDaddy and looking at some community management sort of stuff. But I just think I'm looking forward to be able to bring my perspective, which is probably not the technical stuff, but the business side of a WordPress business. I'm looking forward to interviewing some really good people about that and giving you guys some really practical advice on what you can do in that area.
Awesome. Cool. Kath?
I've got this new word. I was kind of running with nerd-lebrity, kind of like
nerd-lebrity.
Celebrity and nerd, but I think it's more like nerd crushes.
Nerd crush.
Yeah.
I go either way in the nerd space, and I've been really excited to just sending an email out is pretty exciting these days. Now that I get to hang with these cool kids, so you know, I've grown a lot since I began with WP Elevation, starting from being a member and then becoming a coach, and I have to say I'm feeling a little bit intimidated by the standard already sort of stepped up by Troy and KRISTINA. So I've been doing some research. I've been listening to podcasts wide and far, and all the good ones to try and saturate my brain with what it sounds like to be a pro. So who knows what my first episode is going to come out like, but I know it's going to be a lot of fun.
I revisited, we had this conversation during the week on Slack, Kath. I revisited the first episode of the WP Elevation podcast where I interviewed Brennan Dunn, and I went and revisited that recently, and oh my Lord, he was great. I was terrible. I just had there was no vibe, there was no energy, there was no passion, and I think it's just because I was a little bit freaked out. I'm like a deer in the headlights in that interview. So it definitely gets easier the more you do it and the more confident you become. Let's talk about some areas of, and so one of the other differences with this year with the WP Elevation podcast is, of course, we're rolling out seasons. So we're rolling out 4 seasons throughout the year. So we'll take a few weeks off between each season. And previously on the podcast, we've spoken a lot about people's personal journeys, whereas this time around we're talking more about subject matter and more about topical stuff. So maybe let's talk a little bit about the areas of specialty and expertise that you guys are particularly interested in talking about.
I'm always really interested to know what people are doing when it relates to dealing with clients or creating product in the WordPress space. You know, like you said, you can interview people on a podcast. You see it a lot about their personal journey. But I like us connecting with people and digging into how that applies to our listeners. Or like, I always think about like our members at WP Elevation, like what would they be wanting to hear that would help their business? Rather than understanding like someone's personal journey, but what is it that they've figured out that our listeners need to figure out in terms of dealing with clients or services or creating product and selling product in the space. So that always really interests me.
Cool.
Yeah, it's you know, it's funny because when you talk to a lot of the guys, there's a bunch of podcasts out there that recently I've sort of been kind of like Kath, really diving into. And when people talk about their personal stories, it's always fascinating to me that just how normal, humble a beginnings a lot of these people come from. And I think that's the part that can become quite intimidating. Like you speak to some of the guys and they are, you know, they've got 3 businesses under their belt now and they're world renowned, and some of them are speaking at the White House and all this kind of stuff. But most of them started just with an agency and they realized that actually at its core, they just want to help people. And seeing that journey of how they start just helping more people, I think is not only inspiring, but it's just kind of like it's nice to see a blueprint that people can apply to their own lives, you know?
And it is funny, once you spend a few minutes on a podcast with someone who you think is a rock star, you realize that they're just normal people, and you know, and then they're really approachable and they are humble. And you know, I remember when I first started out, you know, I was interviewing Vlad from Managed WP and Yoast and 80 from Woo Themes, and I was completely freaked out and intimidated. And then, you know, as I said, after like 5 or 10 minutes, you realize that they're just normal people. Kath, what's a particular area that you're really keen to? I know you've got a couple of crushes. I'm not going to mention Rand Fishkin at all, but maybe I just did.
Stalking, we call it.
Yeah, Kath is the stalker.
Ridiculous. So I mean, at the core of my business has been about me listening to my customers and and bringing them what they don't know that they need until they need it. And so I'm really excited to be able to ask my my guests, like, what we as developers and web designers should be providing that maybe we aren't, aware of, that we like. Are we listening to our customers well enough? Are we sitting in the right space? And what is it that we should be bringing that potentially we aren't? So uncovering the easy wins from whatever products, services they are offering. And because they, our guests generally have an audience of their own, and they specialize in that audience, just like we sort of have our own specialties. And so I'm really interested to find out what it is that potentially our audience need to know about our micro audiences or our client bases. So I'm excited about that. I love everything to do with community and positioning and getting yourself not necessarily into a niche, but into a group of like-minded colleagues, if you like. So I'm really excited about being able to talk to people about, their own networks as well. And I'm a bit of an SEO nerd, so I may have been lining up people who sort of are in that space purely so I can learn more and get to talk to them. So I'm excited about that. I also love talking about, managing teams, managing people, anything to do with people and talking and getting that stuff all in order. I enjoy. So, and I love talking. So you're going to get it.
You just love it all, don't you? That's awesome.
I think, Troy, what just sort of from what all the coaches have said, what I like about this series of the podcast is we're actually going to, with a lot of them, have a takeaway for the audience as well. So we're going to try and rein the conversation in towards the end and have some takeaways for the audience. So, and we're going to put that in a PDF or a downloadable checklist that you can then take away. So it's going to be great listening, but you're actually going to have something to take away from it too. And I think that's going to be a real asset for this series too.
Yeah, and that's something.
Gold.
And good luck reining conversations in, by the way. But I think that's really important. It's a good point you mentioned, Jim, because I think one of the things, and we've spoken about this in the office a lot, one of the things that we've been frustrated with over the years is listening to a great podcast as you're walking the dog around the park and then getting home and, maybe like going to the website and having to kind of read the transcript or listen to the podcast again. So as Jim mentioned, just having that kind of checklist or the key takeaways from the interview that people can download is going to be really helpful. And Kath, I have total FOMO because I'm an SEO nerd as well. So the truth is, I love SEO. I just don't get the time to do it. And you've sort of stepped up and come in, and you're helping us with our SEO strategy now and talking to people in the SEO space. So I'm like living vicariously through you now, getting to do the SEO stuff.
I'm just sending you little snippets of the wins as they come along.
Yesterday was great. You were putting in Slack all the keywords that we were ranking well for and all the video results we're getting. And I'm like, look at this, it's awesome. I was totally geeking out.
Day one, man. Fun.
Now, Jen, you as you mentioned before, you come from a slightly different background. So what are you most looking forward to in terms of the kinds of topics and areas that you'll be talking to guests about?
Well, similar to Kath, I like the whole people side of it as well. So Kath and I will be bouncing off each other with different things that we're focusing on. But I know we've got a great remote team in the Philippines. So, looking at managing remote teams and how you can build that team up. But also I love the videoing and the editing side of things. And we do a lot of that in the office here in Melbourne. So what I'd like to do is, show you guys how we can do you can do live streaming, how you can easily do video, because it is something that really scares people. So I think, it's once you start doing it, it's not as hard as it seems. So looking at that side of things as well. So I'm looking forward to a few different angles I'm going to be coming in on, and it's going to be fun.
Awesome. Now I'm looking through our podcast project here in Asana, and for those that don't know, Asana recently rolled out boards, kind of like Trello boards. Yeah. So I'm looking at the list of and I'm not going to give any names away, but I'm looking at the list of names that we have in our hit list to contact, and I can see that all of us are starting to put our names next to people that we want to interview. And KRISTINA Romero, I've got a bone to pick with you because they're like 3 people that you've put your name against, and I'm like, no way, I want to interview them.
Did you put my name there, not me.
Did I?
Yes,
Is that right?
Did.
How did that happen?
Did.
Maybe it's because,
have no
you know
idea.
what? I reckon it's because I've failed to get these people on the podcast. So I reckon
And
maybe
just,
you can
like,
charm them.
let
You-
her take care of it.
Yeah, you can charm them and get them on the podcast. Clearly, they don't want to talk to me.
Yeah, switch anybody you want.
No, I'm just playing with you. So we have got so season 1 is rolling out, and I'm kind of announcing this now. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you will know, but I believe season 1 is rolling out on. And so we're rolling out the podcast on Thursdays. We're talking US Pacific time here. Rolling out the podcast every Thursday. So I think the first one goes out next Thursday. Is that right, Jen? The 19th of January?
Yeah, that's the plan. Fingers crossed.
Ooh, so this one will be live on the 19th of January.
Yeah.
And then we'll have 11 episodes in a season, and then we'll take a couple of weeks off, and then we'll do season 2, season 3, and season 4, which will see us through to the end of the year, which will be very exciting. A couple of things for listeners. Every episode of the podcast will have a short link. So, for example, Dre Armida, who's coming up early in the season with KRISTINA, instead of having to go to wplelevation.com/2017/01/whatever, each episode will have a short link, and the short link is just the person's first and last name. So we've got an interview with Justin Ferriman coming up, which we did live in Philadelphia. Justin, of course, is from LearnDash, and we shot that. KRISTINA and I shot that when we were over there for WordCamp US. So his episode would be at wplelevation.com/Justin Ferriman. If you go there, it will automatically redirect you to the episode. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And as Jin mentioned, every episode will have a checklist or a download of some sort that you can download, which will sort of give you the key takeaways and the main points of each of those interviews. It is a video interview. It is a video podcast. So as you can see, we're all wearing our WP Elevation garb, except Mike, because we deliberately didn't give him the memo.
Always shut out, mate. That's my problem.
Always shut out.
Always shut
Sorry,
out.
it's a time zone thing, mate.
Yeah, right. It's a time zone thing.
It's a time zone thing. Yeah. And what else was there? So it will be video. We'll be posting the videos up onto YouTube. We'll be putting the videos up on our website, the WP Elevation website, of course. And we also have a new podcast player. We have a brand new podcast player on the website. We're using Omni Studio this year, OMNY, Omni Studio, which gives us a beautiful podcast player on the website and gives us amazing analytics. So if you do listen to the podcast, we will be tracking you, and I could turn up in your lounge room and thank you for listening to the podcast. So be aware of
Don't
that.
put it past him. He really might do that.
That could be a fun episode.
If not, stalk on your Facebook feed.
This is another of Mike's t-shirts.
And if you have any suggestions of people that that you'd like to see interviewed on the podcast, just hit us up at wplelevation.com. Go to one of our blog posts or one of our episodes and leave us a comment, or hit us up on our Facebook page or tweet us at wplelevation and suggest who you would like to interview. Do you guys have any stretch goals of people that you want to interview that you want to just publicly announce now, maybe that we haven't thought about, like Richard Branson or Oprah Winfrey or
Right.
anyone?
There we go.
I've been vying. I really want to talk to Ryan Dice and Frank Kern. I've been wanting to talk to them for ages, and there's a lot of guys in our group, guys and girls in our group, who follow the broader digital marketing space.
Yeah.
And I think getting them on would be outside of WordPress, sure, but when it comes to marketing and sales process, can't be beaten, man.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And, I think it's just a matter of time. We'll slowly wear them down. We'll just automate emails to them every single day until they say yes.
And I just want to have engaging conversations. So sometimes it's not even, I find it's not even like the biggest name or the most successful that can give you the best insights and kind of, the gold nuggets. So I just want to have really, really good conversations that we get stuff out there to people that they never thought about before, motivate them or encourage them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Kath?
Fun game. I want to talk to someone from the radio. Now, I want to talk to this guy. Are you listening? He's not listening because he doesn't listen to this stuff, but maybe someone can put it out there. Stuart Buchanan, he is a host on FBI, but he's also an expert in digital strategy for not-for-profits and just digital strategy in general. And he did a lot of work here in Australia with, the Opera House and Mona and a few big enterprise-level art projects. And I would love to talk to him. Plus, I love his accent.
Awesome. And FBI is a great local community station in Sydney, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it's quite driven, and They tackle the big stuff and, play great music as well. So, plug
Cool. Jen, who's on your hit list?
I'm just going to go with the flow. I've got a few ideas, but I'll keep quiet.
Okay. Oh, in stealth mode. Well,
Yeah.
I think it's no secret I unashamedly have massive internet crushes on Amy Porterfield and Marie Forleo. So I'm just going to put this out there again to the universe. Marie Forleo and Amy Porterfield, I'm going to continue to politely stalk you until you say yes and agree to be on the podcast, just because I want to hang out with you for 20 minutes and say hi. I don't really want to talk about anything specific. I just want to say hi. So there you go.
Camera.
On camera, exactly. All right. So, hey, thank you so much, guys, for being a part of this, and thanks because I can tell you, if you guys didn't step up and want to do this, I had kind of run out of steam with the podcast, because it is doing a podcast for 2 years every week. It really took it out of us, and, Jen will attest to that. There's quite a few moving parts in terms of producing an episode of the podcast. We are going to... I'm very passionate about processes, and you guys know that I've been building new processes for this. We're going to open source our podcast process at some point and show everyone how we do it, because there are quite a few moving parts to produce an episode of a podcast like this. So thank you for stepping up and wanting to be a part of it, because you've reinvigorated it and you've given the podcast and me sort of some new passion for it. So I really, really appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing all the interviews that you guys put out and make the WP Elevation podcast awesome without me.
Yeah, all the interviews we'll do without you.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Maybe we'll interview you.
Yeah, that'd be.
We'll
yeah.
let you know
No, there
when
are
the
many
job's
more
done.
interesting. There are far more interesting people you can interview and far more interesting conversations you can have without me involved. So, I'm happy to take a bit of a step back. Thanks again for being a part of it. Thank you all for listening and watching and tuning in. Please leave us some comments. Tell us who you'd like us to interview and what kind of topics you'd like us to talk about. And look forward to seeing you all again at some point in the season. And I'll let someone else sign off.
Go Elevate!
Well, I hope you enjoyed getting to know the other hosts of the WP Elevation podcast, all of the coaches here at WP Elevation, and Jen, our digital producer. They are going to be your hosts, along with myself, for 2017. And we're very much looking forward to bringing you interviews with guests. If you have anyone that you would like to nominate for the podcast, please get on over to WPElevation.com, go to one of the podcast episodes and leave us a comment in the comments section. Please subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating and a review. It really does help us come up in the search results so that we can share the love and reach a wider audience. You can find all you need to know there at wpelevation.com/iTunes. Thanks for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you on an episode that I host, and I look forward to seeing other episodes of the WP Elevation podcast that I don't host. I hope you have a fantastic 2017. Until I speak to you again, go elevate.